I'm very happy to be here at this urban yoga program this evening. I was asked to speak on a very intriguing subject, the city of gates. A look into the body, mind, and you. Now, the body, mind, and you is something we can understand, but what is the city of gates? Interestingly, in the Vedic scriptures, the body has been compared to a city. You know, every city has many roads, streets, buildings, structures, residents, and so on. It has many exits from which you can leave the city. You have many entrance points. So similarly, this body is like a city. And the Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam, two very famous scriptures, they explain that the city of the body has 9 gates. In Sanskrit, it's called Navadvara Pura. Nava means 9, Dvara means gates, and Pura means city. So this body is a city of 9 gates. We have 2 gates, the 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, another 2 gates, 2 ears, that's 6, and the mouth, that's 7. And then we have the genitals and we have the anus, so that's 9. So 7 in the region of the head and 2 below. So these are the apertures for the body. That's 9. And in this body, in this city, there are many highways and many little streets and roads. There's much traffic going on within. You know, there's blood going in, there's food coming in, there's something going out, all sorts of things happening in the body. The body is a very complex organism. We often don't pay attention to what the body is all about. You know, we focus on what the body can give to us in the instant moment. We eat food, for example, and we like the taste of the food we eat. We chew it, swallow it, but then after that we don't know what happens to the food. How the food gets digested in the stomach and the intestines, and then how that is assimilated into the body, how it's actually, the nutrition is then transported into different parts of the body so that all the senses of the body get energized. We really don't know how that happens. We just eat and let nature do the rest. So there's a complex web of transport mechanisms, of many sorts of control, and just as we were coming across here, there was a red signal for pedestrian traffic to cross the road, and there was not a car in sight, and a mile this way and a mile that way. But Manoj told me, no, there's policemen here around, and if you cross the road when there's a red light for a pedestrian, even if there are no cars, they could fine you. So there's a lot of control, there's organization. You jump a traffic signal, you get fined. So also the body has its own control mechanisms. It's extremely intricate. It's so intricate that we cannot even imagine. In the good old days, you had a simple doctor who would do his MBBS or something, and very rarely did you get someone who specialized in something. But nowadays, you have to have an MBBS, and then you do a specialization, and then a super specialization, and you may have a medical specialist who may focus on just one tiny part of the body. Maybe someone's focusing on the eye, but not just the eye, but just the retina. Someone's just in the cornea. You have a cornea specialist, you have a retina specialist, you have someone specializing in very small parts of the body. So as knowledge grows, it gets more and more specialized, and the more we realize how little we know about everything, even about the body. What to speak of the rest of the earth? What do we know about the oceans? The oceans are so vast. What kind of life forms inhabit the depths of the oceans? What about the crust of the earth? We don't know what's happening there. We have some idea, geology, oceanography, and we have these sciences. But really speaking, we don't know much about everything. What then to speak further of the rest of the universe? And what then further to speak of anything that may be beyond this universe? There's no question of us going that far. We don't even understand our own bodies. When you actually practice yoga, I mean what's commonly called yoga, but in strict parlance it's called Ashtanga yoga or Hatha yoga. Ashta means 8, Anga means limb, so the 8-fold yoga process. So when you do the exercises and the breathing and so on, that is actually part of an 8-fold system of yoga. Generally when we use the word yoga, people imagine or conceive of only some exercises and breathing. But that is just one small part of what yoga is really meant to be. The first 2 sections of yoga are just do's and don'ts for life. Codes of conduct. For example, you shouldn't steal, you shouldn't lie, and so on and so forth. So there are do's and don'ts on how we should control and regulate our life. The first thing, even before one begins the breathing exercises called pranayama, and one starts all the other exercises of the body, there has to be a regulation of one's lifestyle, one's habits, one's behavior, one's mentality, one's attitudes. And it is only with the right attitude and right lifestyle can we approach yoga properly. Then, when we perform yoga, we actually understand the workings of the body. We understand how things happen. When I first started doing a little bit of yoga for my health, I started realizing there were many more muscles in the body than I knew ever existed. You know, you have pains and aches in parts that you never knew existed before. Some little corner of the body somewhere, some little ache and pain. Of course, you keep doing it, then it goes away because you exercise those muscles. So, the body is a very, very complicated system. And still, the way it works is mind-boggling. It's just bewildering. People are not even able to understand how this one organ like the eye functions. What to speak of the eye? You just analyze a small portion of the eye, take a little tissue, or take a cell. It's so difficult to understand how things happen. Even a little cell with all its mitochondria, DNA, RNA, the nucleus, cytoplasm, and so on. I'm just quoting from the biology I remember from high school. It's so intricate. Actually, one cell is more complex than a huge computer. If you thought computers were complex, you take a look at this human cell. One cell. Many, many hundreds of cells make one tissue. Many, many hundreds of tissues make one organ. And hundreds of organs make up this one body. And we don't even know really what a cell is. So, somehow, these different cells have been organized into tissues into organs into the whole body. Such a complicated arrangement and a mesh of these things. And still we believe there's no God? Who is making this all work together? Such intricate workings of nature cannot happen by chance. So in any case, this body is like a city that's so well planned, so well organized. So like you have a city where before you start the city, you plan the layouts. You have the streets, you have the houses, you have your parks, you have everything that the city is supposed to require. So similarly, this human body has been designed perfectly for certain things. Now, what is the purpose of this human body? Let's consider other bodies that are available in nature. According to the Vedic scriptures, there are 8.4 million species of life. Now, when you study biology, then, or zoology, then you have a different understanding, because zoology or botany classifies species according to certain morphological characteristics, physical appearances, and so on. But the Vedic scriptures do not classify the species according to these parameters. Interestingly, even though the morphological features or the external structure of the body is an important criterion, there are other criteria, specifically the level of consciousness. What is the way we look at life? How do we look at the world? What do we consider the goal of life? How evolved has our spirituality become? That is the criterion for determining the species we are in. You see, in terms of the different types of bodies here, we have the animal bodies. Within the animal species, there's so many types. The birds, the plants. There are certain common activities that we have. We eat, we sleep, we reproduce and have sex, and we are also afraid, and we are fearful, and we defend. So eating, sleeping, mating, and defending are 4 characteristics which are common to humans as well as animals. Now, for these activities we require the body, or rather it's for the upkeep of the body that we require these 4 things. So different animals and birds are also engaged in similar activities. But this city of 9 gates, this particular form, this city that has 2 hands and 2 legs and that walks in a certain way, sits in a certain way, has a certain special feature. And that feature is not available in the other species of life. That is, that the human body, this city of 9 gates, has capacity or a capability to think deeper than what the other species can. The animals also think, but their thinking and intelligence and planning is limited to ensuring eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. Similarly, in general, when people's spiritual consciousness is not sufficiently evolved, then they think of this body as being meant only for these 4 purposes: eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. Then the purpose of the city of 9 gates is not fulfilled. And therefore, there is dissatisfaction. You see, satisfaction can come only when something is used for the purpose for which it is intended. You have a car, but you're not able to use your car for some reason. Then you don't feel satisfied. You have the best car, the Jaguar or some other model, and you're not able to use it. You have a very sophisticated iPhone or a computer, but you never use it for anything. You don't have any opportunity to use it. It's frustrating. You have musical skills, let's say, but you don't have the opportunity to train yourself in it or to use it or to display it. Then you don't feel satisfied. If you really desire to be a good sportsman and you don't have the opportunity to fulfill your inclinations, then you feel dissatisfied. So similarly, this particular city of 9 gates is intended for a particular purpose. And when that purpose is not fulfilled, then there is dissatisfaction. We don't feel happy. We may experience some pleasure, but pleasure has to do with eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. Real happiness goes beyond these 4. So long as the human's spiritual consciousness is not evolved, there is not much difference between the human and the animal, actually. Humans can do these 4 activities in a very sophisticated way, that's all. The whole eating, sleeping, mating, defending exercise is something that we do in a very polished way. We sleep on soft foam mattresses, cover ourselves with silken bed sheets and so on, and sleep in a room that's artificially heated or cooled. And we have an animal in the jungle, in the forest, that would sleep on the ground, and probably the animal never needs sleeping pills, and we need sleeping pills because we're so anxious about everything. When it comes to eating, we go to the best restaurants and pay through our nose to eat it. And then we take a few delicacies, and many times we can't take it because we have health issues. We can't take this or we can't eat that. But the animals eat everything with equal relish, and probably they enjoy their food as much, if not more, than what we enjoy when we eat. Similarly, we defend ourselves. We have police, we have the army, we have weapons, we have various other sophisticated forms of defense. We have alarms, we have locking systems to protect our bodies, our wealth, our homes, and so on. The animals have their own defense mechanisms. They have their nails, they have their claws, they have their teeth. So animals also defend. Human beings engage in sex, and so do the animals. But the pleasure that humans derive from sex is not substantially different from what the animals derive. Is there any difference? It's the same. But usually the animals are freer in the sense that they have no trappings. But human beings end up with so many difficulties. Incidentally, it is only the human species that doesn't follow the laws of nature when it comes to sexual activity. The animals follow the laws of nature. They have specific mating seasons, they go according to how nature has programmed their bodies and their minds. But the human beings are different. So in any case, these are the four activities which both kinds of entities do, the animals as well as humans, but humans do it in a very polished way. And despite all this, there is a pinprick in the whole system. There's something missing. Despite having very evolved and sophisticated forms of eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, we are still not able to be happy. There's something missing somewhere. What is it? And the answer is that the animals are not expected to be spiritual. The animals are not expected to attend programs like this and discuss philosophy or practice yoga or think of some higher spiritual truths in life. They're not expected to, because that's not how their intelligence has evolved. But humans are expected to. And if humans restrict themselves only to these four activities, or polished ways of doing these four activities, expanded ways of doing these activities, then how better are they than the animals? Not substantially. So the evolution of spiritual consciousness finds its pinnacle in the human species. The human species has a consciousness that is unparalleled. Not because we can invent computers, not because we can have aircraft and spaceships that we can send out into space, not because we have atom bombs, not because we build skyscraper buildings. That's not what differentiates animals from human beings, because even all these are ultimately just expanded forms of eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. Transportation. Why are we going from one place to another? It's only for eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. So the animal moves from one place to another place on four legs, and we move on four wheels, or perhaps we fly with two wings in an aircraft. But even the purpose of transportation is the same. Similarly, skyscraper buildings or computers, at the end of it, we use it only for these four. So no, that's not what the human being is meant to do. Only. The evolved consciousness is meant to question its own existence. The animal has no capacity to do that. You and I have the capacity to question our own existence. Who am I? Now, really a major question, but we don't take this question seriously. Who am I? sometimes when people get into an argument, a little heated argument, then one person in the heat of the argument tells the other, "Who do you think you are?" Yeah? And they may use some other colorful words which I cannot repeat here. Who do you think you are? But the person who's asking the question also most likely doesn't realize what a profound question he has asked. You could have a whole session of philosophy on that. They would forget all about their quarrel. They would get into philosophizing, and you really asked a good question. Who am I? Yes. So, who do you think you are? Yeah, actually, it's a good question. Who do I think I am? Who am I? Actually, this is the foundational question of the Vedas. The entire spiritual knowledge rests on this one question. Who am I? Now, generally when people ask, who are you? We give our name. I'm so-and-so. Or I'm from this region or this country. Or I'm a doctor, or I'm such and such. But actually, that's not the real me. Inasmuch as if I'm driving a car, let's say I'm sitting in a Jaguar, and there's another person who has a Mercedes, and someone else has another car, and we're talking to our friend, and we say, "Look, the Jaguar is going there, and the Mercedes is there." But actually, it's the driver who's driving the Jaguar. And then we say, "Hey, Jaguar, move ahead." You honk, you're standing there. We're not talking to the Jaguar, we're talking to the driver of the Jaguar or the Mercedes. We presume that it's understood. So similarly, when we address each other by our names, we know that actually we are not these bodies. These names only apply or pertain to our body. But this body is always changing. But that I never seems to change. I was a small child. I was born. Then I was a small boy. Then I became a young man. Then I became middle-aged. Then I became an old man. And I will die. So through all these changes, the body has changed completely. But that sense of I-ness, that remains. So what is that sense of I that outlives the changes of the body? Something worth thinking about. The body changes, even the mind changes. When we are children, our minds say we want to play with toys, we want to do so many things. When we are teenagers, our conceptions of enjoyment change. When we are middle-aged, again they change. When we are old, again our conceptions of life change. So not just our body, but even our mind changes. Our intelligence also changes. The intelligence of a small child, the intelligence of an adult, the intelligence of an elderly person with the experience of the world, it's different. So despite all these changes in the body, the mind, and the intelligence, there's one thing that doesn't change. It's our sense of identity. It's our sense of I-ness, that I have changed. I was a boy, now I'm a man, now I'm an old man. So who is that I? We generally say, my head is aching, my hand is aching. We don't say I head aching. We don't say I hand aching. We say my hand is aching, meaning that the hand is different from me. My body pains. That means me and my body are different. Just see how we've structured a language. So this philosophy is even structured into the way we speak, but we don't think about it. When we say my body, this is my body, then we indicate that I am different from my body. Similarly, when somebody dies and we go to offer condolences, we say, "Oh, he's had a wonderful passing away." Or a close relative of the person may say, "Oh, my friend or my brother has passed away." But who has passed away? The body is just there. You're going to bury or cremate the body soon, but the body is here. So who has passed away? So someone has passed away. And by that someone's moving, the body that was formerly alive is now dead. So that means that there was something inside that body that made that body come alive. Inasmuch as there was a driver who sat in the Jaguar or the Mercedes to make the car come alive. But we know that the Jaguar is not alive, the Mercedes is not alive, it's the driver who's alive. And because the driver operates the car, so the car also exhibits symptoms of life. We speak, so the car speaks with its horns. We see, so the car also has lights, so you can see. You have a windscreen to see. We have organs in the body, we have a cooling system. So the car has its radiator and it has an engine and we have fuel. So there's a hardware to the body, to the car. So, but even if the car is in good shape, unless the driver sits inside, the car won't move. So similarly, this body is like a vehicle that needs to be operated by somebody. That somebody is the soul. That somebody is the spiritual you and the spiritual me. I am spiritual. I am the soul, and so are you. So is each and every one of us. So the real I and the real you is not this body. When we sit here and we look at each other, we are only seeing our body. We are not seeing the real you and the real me. That is something we don't have an understanding of. We can't see with these eyes. So the body, this city of 9 gates, has an enjoyer, has a king who's sitting within, and that's the soul. And this soul wants to be the enjoyer of the body, inasmuch as the driver wants to enjoy the car. So he's called the king of the body, the enjoyer of the body, one who wants to enjoy through the medium of the body. So unless we understand the spiritual aspect of our existence, or rather the spiritual nature of our identity, our human form of life, the city of 9 gates, will never be really fulfilled. I was quoting this in a lecture a couple of days ago, that there was somebody who said that we are not human beings with a spiritual experience. Rather, we are spiritual beings currently undergoing a human experience. Interesting point, isn't it? In other words, we are the eternal spirit soul. Presently, we are in a human body right now. But that doesn't mean that we were always in a human body. Because the soul is eternal, so the soul was in a body in a previous life. It could have been an animal body, it could have been anything. Presently we may be in a male body, but maybe I was in a female body in the previous life, and maybe another male body in the life previous to that. We don't know. But the soul moves from body to body, body to body. So presently we have this human experience. So we think I am this human being. But no, the city of 9 gates is just my body. It's not me. But the city of 9 gates affords us this unique opportunity of understanding ourselves. That is not possible in the other species of life. Animals cannot discuss philosophy. So unless the human form of life is utilized for the sake of understanding our spiritual nature and moving ahead, we consider the human form of life to be unsuccessful. So as one proceeds and understands that my nature is spiritual, what next? What about the body and the mind? Is the mind the same as the soul? Now this is a question that is very frequently asked. People confuse the mind with the brain. People confuse the intelligence with the brain. People confuse the soul with the mind. People confuse the body with the self. So there's so many different types of confusions. The Bhagavad Gita, however, gives us a very clear understanding of these things. We understand what the body is. We understand what the soul is. We understand what the mind is. We understand what the intelligence is. These are distinct entities. Imagine, let's take an analogy from usage of computers. You have a person who's using the computer. Then you have the hardware of the computer. And you have the software of the computer. So the operator sits and uses the computer. That's like the soul. And then the hardware is like the body. And the software is like the intelligence. And then you have input-output devices. You have a CPU, you have a terminal, and you have printers, input-output, facilities, and so on. So these are like the different organs, the different senses that we have. So this city of 9 gates interacts with the outside world through these apertures, the eyes, the ears, the nostrils, the mouth. These are what we call knowledge-acquiring senses. We acquire knowledge of the world through these organs. And then there are organs which we call working senses, the hands, the legs. Then we have the voice, the anus, the genitals. So they also work for us. So the body works in this way. And what then is the relationship between the soul and the body? The relationship between the soul and body is that of the soul operating through the software to the hardware. If the software isn't in order, then you can't operate the hardware, and the hardware will not function. So similarly, it is the intelligence that is a via medium between the soul and this gross body. So the soul is life, and then the soul acts, the intelligence acts to discriminate, to distinguish between what's good, what's not good, what I should do, what I shouldn't do. The intelligence imparts, so to speak, the quality of discrimination. So therefore we are able to discriminate what we think is good from what we think is bad. So the soul in this way is interacting with the body. The Upanishads, some other holy texts, give us a very interesting analogy. An analogy of a chariot. Imagine there are 5 horses. There are reins, there's a chariot driver, the chariot itself, and there's a passenger. So the passenger represents the soul, the chariot represents the body, the chariot driver represents the intelligence. We just saw a horse carriage here, by the way, so I remember this example was coming here. We had some local boys who were having a lot of fun in that carriage. So the chariot driver is the intelligence, the reins represent the mind, and the horses represent the senses. So the intelligence works through the mind and controls the senses. Or if the intelligence is not strong, if the chariot driver is not strong enough, then the senses go haywire. One horse in one direction, the other horse in the other direction, each of the horses in different directions, and the reins also just follow the horses, and the poor chariot driver can't control the chariot. We can only imagine what happens to the chariot and to the poor passenger sitting behind. So when the senses are uncontrolled, we can understand the mind is uncontrolled. We can also understand the intelligence is uncontrolled. That's because the intelligence is not taking any instruction from the soul. When the intelligence is nourished by some spiritual instructions, then the intelligence becomes strong. Then the intelligence controls the reins, which means the mind. The mind controls the senses. And then we are very calm and peaceful. We experience a higher grade of happiness. With a controlled mind and controlled senses, with purified intelligence, gradually what emerges is our acknowledgement or understanding or experience of our spiritual side. When the senses and mind are uncontrolled, we cannot recognize our own spiritual nature. That is why yoga, first and foremost, insists on sense control. Truly speaking, we cannot do yoga unless we try to control the mind and senses. That's the first word in yoga. Because yoga means ultimately you have to link with the Supreme. The word yoga comes from the Sanskrit yuj, which means to link. So we have to link with our source, who is a spiritual source. So that linking process is called yoga. And for us to be able to do that linking activity, we have to calm the mind down. Presently, the mind is speaking 20 to the dozen. Every moment the mind has a different thought. I was reading an interesting article the other day. Some psychologists have done some research. And they said that an average human being thinks 80,000 thoughts every day. Now just calculate what it means. 80,000 thoughts in a day, different thoughts. If anyone's good at arithmetic, you can divide that by, just to get how many thoughts per second or something, per average. In a day, that's 24 hours. So we have 80,000 divided by, if someone's got a quick calculator, you can do a quick calculation. And see, it's going to work out to an astonishing figure. That means every second, practically, our mind is flitting from subject to subject, topic to topic. Even as we are sitting here, we are speaking on this subject, our minds, not mine because I have to focus on what I'm speaking. But even then, my mind is still searching, what am I going to speak next? What am I going to speak next? Because I haven't come with a planned speech. So it's thinking, what next? What next? So even my mind is moving here and there. Even as I'm focusing one part of my mind and speaking, another part is exploring, what next? What am I going to say now? So similarly, I'm sure every one of you've noticed that your mind has wandered everywhere. You must have thought of dozens and dozens of different things in the few minutes that we've been together now. So that's the nature of the mind. It wanders. So long as the mind is always fluctuating, it's always wandering here and there, we can never really focus our mind on anything, our intelligence on anything for long. One of the biggest problems, I deal a lot with university students in different countries, and one of the biggest problems and the most commonly asked questions is, I can't concentrate. Can you please tell me how I can concentrate on my studies? I can't focus my mind on what I'm doing. Even professionals, sometimes they say, I can't focus my mind on work. My mind just travels everywhere. So therefore there is dissatisfaction because we can't focus the mind. So we have to practice those things that will eventually help us to come out of the bodily conception of life. So the body is being controlled through the senses. The senses are being controlled through the mind through the intelligence. So that's the sequence in which everything moves ahead. So this city of 9 gates is a very precious opportunity. We have got residents in this city as opposed to other cities. Those other cities are perhaps not as evolved. So in Melbourne, for example, you have so many opportunities to pursue your career or maybe many other things that you like to do. Maybe those opportunities don't exist in some other smaller towns. So similarly, in this city of 9 gates, we have a precious opportunity which is not available in varieties of other cities, namely the animals, species, the birds, and so on. So the mind, body, and me, the three are distinct. They are different. A gross body, which is the body made of flesh and blood and bones and so on. Then we have the subtle material body, which is made of the mind and the intelligence. And then we have the soul, which is spiritual. So you have this triad. You have these three. And the soul interacts with the gross body through the medium of this subtle body. And sometimes when the subtle body is very active, it may even go beyond the gross body. You know, when we dream at night, the subtle body can leave the body, the gross body, and go somewhere and come back into the body. But of course, if it doesn't come back, then you won't wake up. Then you'll have to be buried or cremated. But usually it comes back. So then we wake up. You know, there's something called out-of-body experiences. I don't know how many of you have heard of this term, but it's something that is a very mysterious phenomenon which people haven't been able to quite understand clearly. I remember I was speaking with one lady who was training to be a cardiac surgeon. She was doing her super specialization, and she was working under a qualified cardiothoracic surgeon, and she performed this along with her superior, an open, what do you call it, bypass surgery. Yes, they cut open the chest and then they operate on the heart. It's a very major surgery that they do. And this was in India. And the lady who was being operated was from a village. She wasn't educated. She was practically illiterate. And this was the first time she had come to a big city. She had never seen a big city in her life. And so anyway, the surgery was over. And then the big surgeon, they leave it to the junior doctors to do all the winding up work. And the big surgeon comes and only does the main job. The preparation and the winding up is done by his assistants or her assistants. So then the main surgeon left, and this lady was then doing all the winding up. She did everything. And later she waited for the patient to come back to external consciousness. And then the patient started speaking with her after some time, after several hours, when she came to again. And she started describing what had happened in the operating theater. Now, she didn't have the vocabulary to explain. She couldn't obviously name the instruments and things like that, but she just pointed out that, there were so many people in the room, and this one did that, and the one who had with the spectacles did this, and this is what you did to my body. And she started explaining details, and this lady was shocked. She said, "How did you know these things?" There's no way this lady could have, fabricated this, because she was unconscious. She was a doctor. She saw her coming out of the effect of anesthesia. And she said, "How could you have known this?" And this was an illiterate lady. She didn't know anything about Google or anything, where you can go on and search how is a heart surgery done, and then you learn certain terminologies and everything. She didn't know anything. And she described in such accurate detail the process of the operation. Of course, not the technical part, but she explained many things. This lady was stunned. So then she proceeded to inquire deeper. She asked her many questions. And this lady, the patient, answered perfectly. And it so happened that this lady surgeon had been attending Bhagavad Gita classes recently. She had just started. So she just heard about the soul, and she had heard about these out-of-body experiences. But she hadn't taken it too seriously, because she was thinking, how is it possible, And here, lo and behold, she has this, this patient who's like this. So she was so excited, and she checked and rechecked to make sure there was no, fraud or something like that, no deception or hallucination or anything of the sort. And then she rushed to her head of the department of that, surgery or whatever. And very excited, she said, "Look, this is what happened, this." So the head of the department looked at her and said, "Hush, hush. Just go ahead with your job. Don't worry about these things. Do you want to get your degree or don't you want to get your degree? We don't dabble in these things." This lady was so distraught. She said, "But this is such a phenomenal thing. How could it happen? How could this lady have seen this or known this? I've been present all through in the operating theater. Nothing has happened. It was not a fabrication or a hallucination." But anyway, she was just hushed up, and she said, "No, we medical people, we don't deal with all these paranormal phenomena. We don't deal with all this." Then the next day when she met me, she was again all excited, but she was also flustered and frustrated. She said, "This could have been the topic of a wonderful research paper, but they don't want me to write on these things because of whatever reasons." So these out-of-body, what is the explanation? How did this lady actually know what was going on? And she explained to the surgeon that actually she floated above the body and she was looking down at her own body being operated. And she was actually seeing how the body was being cut up and how many people were there. She could even hear them speaking, although she didn't understand what they were speaking, but she could hear them. And she described the details of what was going on there from that vantage point. And then she says, after a while, I felt myself getting sucked back in to the body. And as if some unseen force was pulling me back into the body. So that subtle body could exist without the gross body. Now, had that connection with the gross body been cut, then she would have died. But it wasn't cut. So therefore she returned to her body from the precipice, from the edge of the cliff. She was almost there, but somehow or the other she came back to life. And so then the question arises, who is it that was seeing? What scientific explanation do we have from the concepts of modern science, modern medicine? There's no explanation for these things. So the soul is carried by the subtle body, consisting of the mind, the intelligence, and the false ego. These are three elements, according to the Bhagavad Gita, which constitute the subtle body. At the time of death, the subtle body leaves the gross body, carrying with it the soul, and then the gross body is destroyed. The subtle body moves on to another destination, another body, another life, another chapter in its history. So the subtle body can travel, and it can see things beyond the gross body. So therefore, of course, this is not a good time to speak on this topic, but there is something called ghost. I don't want to sound too much like as people talk about ghosts and tell these ghost stories and so on. But no, I'm speaking about it from a purely, shall we say, philosophical angle. Not from a sensationalist angle, but yes, ghosts. What are ghosts actually? This question arises. Do ghosts exist and what are they? Ghosts are simply subtle bodies without a gross body. And being a ghost can be a very frustrating experience because you have desires, because the mind is full of desires. But you don't have the vehicle through which you can fulfill those desires. It's like, imagine a person is paralyzed, but the mind is functioning very, very well. He wants to say something, can't speak. He wants to do something, can't lift his fingers or his hands. Very frustrating. So similarly, a ghostly being is nothing but a subtle body that doesn't have a gross body. For certain kinds of karma, one gets that kind of a body. One has to live out one's term in that ghostly experience. And that is not the city of 9 gates. And then one is forced to enter by the laws of nature into other suitable bodies. So the subtle body, the soul, and the gross body, they're different entities. And ultimately, after moving through body after body, eventually, when one becomes spiritually self-realized, one attains the perfection of our spiritual life, we become completely purified of anything material in the heart, then one becomes eligible to get rid of even the subtle body. Then the soul remains in all its purity. The state of the soul is revived. And the soul is now ready to return to its original home, to the spiritual realm that is beyond this material atmosphere. There is a spiritual dimension of existence beyond this world. That's where we belong, we meaning the soul, and we have to be there. And this city of 9 gates is a marvelous opportunity for us to actually get there. As far as other things are concerned, we can say, been there, done it. But yes, since we've been there and done it, let's look for something more. Whatever happiness people look for, as far as the platform of the body is concerned, we can say, been there, done it. But, so why should we do it again and again and again? Now we're looking for something because we haven't been there and we want to do it. We want to reach there and reach our eternal constitutional atmosphere. Like a fish coming back to its original home in the water. That's the purpose of our life. That is the purpose of yoga. And that is the ultimate purpose of the city of 9 gates. Thank you very much. I'll stop here. I'll leave the floor open for questions. What is the time, by the way? 7:30. Oh, I think I've crossed my time limit, yeah? 7:30. So, Manoj, what's our program now? We have time for questions? Okay. Yeah, you have a question?
How about the pineal gland, the third eye? That's not in the gates, or that's something different?
The pineal gland and the other parts of the brain.
Yeah, all the other parts, the metaphysical parts of the body. So
Yeah.
they fit into the gates.
Yeah, actually, René Descartes, is that how you pronounce it? The French philosopher? Descartes, is that how you say? Descartes. René Descartes. He was one of the earliest philosophers in the non-Eastern hemispheres to postulate the idea of the mind-body duality. Of course, what he called mind, actually he meant soul, but he didn't have a clear idea of that. So he postulated that the mind, as he understood it, was located in the pineal gland of the brain. But modern researchers don't agree with it, and there seems to be, we don't also seem to have any agreement with that idea. But all the glands of the body, the different organs of the body, that's part of the gross body, not part of the subtle body. The subtle body cannot be felt as we can feel the gross body. We can actually touch and feel the brain, the capillaries and the arteries, the blood, flesh, bones, and so on. But these 3 subtle items, mind, intelligence, and the false ego, which are progressively subtler, cannot be felt. They are so subtle. So the mind is different from the brain, and so is the intelligence. If you going back to the analogy of the computer, if you compare the brain to the CPU, or the brain to the hardware rather, then the intelligence is the software. Any other question? Yeah.
I've actually got 2 questions. One being, is there such a thing as a new soul, a first life for a soul, rather than return every time?
Mm-hmm.
And the nadis, Where do they belong?
What's that?
The nadis?
Nadis, okay. So your first question is there anything like a new soul? Or is it just the same old souls moving around? Well, actually the souls, according to the Bhagavad Gita, are eternal. They're never born and they never die. So therefore there is never the question of a new soul, because the souls are always existing. But they do occupy different types of bodies. The souls may occupy the body of a bacterium, the body of a plant, the body of an animal or a bird or a human. So even in this room, as we are sitting here now, how many souls would you estimate there are? Like to take a guess?
162.
Any particular reason for such precision?
That was just a guess. I'm not really good with
Okay,
numbers.
all right. You see, we may think, well, okay, let's estimate how many people are here, maybe 50 or 70 people, and so we have 70 souls, but actually there's millions and millions of souls in this one room. How's that? There's not only you and me, the presiding souls, so to speak, of our bodies, but within our body are millions of bacteria. Some good bacteria, some bad bacteria. And these bacteria are living entities, and they also have a soul. Every cubic centimeter of air has so many bacteria, so many germs. They're also living entities, they also have souls. So if you analyze it, this is just one room in Melbourne. Now you can imagine how many souls are there in Melbourne, how many in Australia, how many in the earth, how many in the universe. So we are talking of staggeringly high numbers. So it's practically infinite as far as we know. It's just the souls are moving from body to body, body to body. So in that sense you could say they are new if they're newly coming to the human form of life. But they're not new in the sense that they're just born. No. Your second question is, what are nadis?
Where do they belong? Do they belong in the gross body or?
What, the nadis?
Yes.
Yes.
They belong in the gross body cells.
Right. So your question is about nadis. They're actually, I'll need to explain with a little, I need to give you a new concept. You see, in the gross body we have subtle airs, which are called prana. These subtle airs are actually responsible, according to yoga theory, for different organs to function. You have certain subtle airs responsible for the digestive system, certain subtle airs that are in charge of the circulatory system, some in charge of the respiratory system, and so on and so forth. There are 5 main pranas, airs, and there are 5 subsidiary subtle airs. So the yogis, when they practice meditation, what they do is to try to lift the soul through these pranas up to the top and leave through a tiny little hole in the head. And the soul leaves the body from that little hole, very, very tiny hole. You can't see it. It's too tiny. And then it leaves. So these subtle airs, they are all over the body. And this prana moves in the body in channels, and these channels are called nadis. So just as the blood moves in veins and arteries, so the prana moves in nadis. But the difference is that the nadis are not physical tubes like the capillaries and the arteries are. These are just channels, that's all. It's just flow of prana in the body. So along the spine you have 2 called the Ida and the Sushumna. They have the sun and the moon. So you have the prana flows through the entire system, to the city of 9 gates. I didn't want to get into too many technical details today. But just as you have many arterial roads in Melbourne city, you may have a ring road, I don't know. So also these nadis flow through the entire system of the body, the city of 9 gates. and carries the energy throughout, from the tips of the fingers to the tips of the toes to the top of the head. So that's what the nadis are all about. So that's subtle airs. And they also leave along with the subtle body at the time of death. They don't remain behind. It's only the gross body that perishes, that is then cremated or buried, and so on. All right? Is there any other question? Yes.
I have a question regarding the subtle body.
Mm-hmm.
So as souls progress towards Godhead, lifetime after lifetime, should the subtle body effectively become more subtle?
Okay, so your question is that as the soul progresses in spiritual realization, will the subtle body become more subtle? I would put it this way, it becomes more purified. It becomes purified of material identification, of material identity, and it becomes spiritualized. And eventually, when the living entity reaches the point of spiritual perfection, not just the gross body, but even the subtle body is left behind. And the pure soul, which is spiritual, goes back to the spiritual world. So even the subtle body is material. So the mind, the intelligence, they are material phenomena. They're entities, but they're not independently conscious. Yeah? Any other question? Yes.
Within the scriptures, is it mentioned? So once you reach the spiritual world, you have a recollection of all your travels through all your past lives and journeys to that point. So do you have a capacity and consciousness of where you've actually been, or whether at the time you've been there?
Okay, your question is that when the soul gets to the spiritual world, does it have a recollection of all the lives spent in the material world?
Yes.
Yes, like a nightmare. You know, because life in this material world is a nightmare. It really is. Well, it's also a daymare, you know. It's birth, death, old age, disease, death. We've faced it all, we've been through it all. And that's why God, by His unbounded mercy, has made us forget our past lives. Don't we have enough problems in this one life? That we have to remember all the problems of our previous lives and how we died. Can you imagine, in some previous life we were probably a rat, and then we had the cat coming to eat us, and I remember that, and the trauma we had to go when the cat was going to eat us, and you know, so it's really a blessing. There are many people who can remember their previous lives, and it's torture, believe me, it's torture. I know a few people who remember their previous lives, and they have such a major problem. And especially children, because many of the cases of past life memories have happened with young children, and then the memory kind of fades away. But it's traumatic for these children because they have a severe identity crisis. Who am I? Who are my parents? Are these my parents, or those were my parents from the previous life? You know, and especially for research, sometimes they are taken to their old homes and they want to be with the mother or father of their previous life. So it's terrible. So therefore, very kindly the Lord from within the heart has given us forgetfulness. So yes, when we go back to the spiritual world, then we understand what's happened. But it's as if it's all happened in a flash. From the time span, or from the viewpoint of eternity, which is what the spiritual world is, our experience here, even though it may have spanned millions of lives, appears like a flash. Even though now it appears like it's dragging and dragging and dragging. But when you're there, then it's gone. See? Yes?
As we progress from life to life, as these two people say, we forget our previous life, but we retain some spiritual knowledge, right? So then in the next life, we find it easier to progress from that point. How does that work?
Okay, I'm repeating the questions because I think they're recording this for the benefit of those who can hear. So your question is that when we move from life to life, we also take the spiritual knowledge along with us, right? Is that how it works? That's your question.
Well, yeah, I was that understanding that we take some spiritual knowledge with us, so that in the next life it's easier for us to progress from that point.
That's right.
And go further on.
That's exactly what is explained in the Bhagavad Gita, that we carry the spiritual inclinations and the spiritual progress with us from life to life. So if, let's say, we did 48% in the last life, we'll begin with 48% in this life. But that doesn't hold materially. Let's say if someone was born in a Rockefeller family in one life, there's no guarantee that he'll be born in a billionaire's family in the next life. He may be born as an animal or anything, right? So these things don't get carried over. But spiritually, the inclination gets carried over. You may not remember all the technical things you heard in terms of spiritual knowledge, but your inclination, your propensity towards spirituality will be very pronounced. You will have an inexplicable inclination. You can't explain that. You know, we have a little temple, and I met one lady from the Middle East, and she said it's against our religion. I mean, this kind of concept we don't find in our religion, but I don't know why. I'm getting attracted to coming here. I just come here and cry. She said, I don't know what's happening to me, why I'm getting attracted here. I can't explain it. So I said, it's coming from a previous life. Because you had this very strong attachment in a previous life, and in an inexplicable way, which cannot be logically explained, you have this attraction for a particular path or a particular philosophy or ideology or state of mind. So that's coming forward from the previous life. So therefore, you find some people naturally take to it like fish to water, and some people till the last breath they don't want to have anything to do with it. So the proof that someone had some connection with spirituality in a serious way in a previous life is that he or she will have some inclination for it in this life. So that's how it goes. So you begin from 48% and then move on. Maybe you do up to 65, and then the next life you move on till you reach 100%. Okay? Yeah. Yes, you had a question?
So that 100% would be to be forever in the spiritual world?
That's right. 100% means that now you come out of the cycle of birth and death once and for all, and you go to the spiritual world.
It's a process.
Yes. Every life you go higher and higher and higher. And when you reach that 100% figure, you're through. So we have to work in such a way that this life is our last life. Because we've got a background. Otherwise we wouldn't be here discussing these topics today. So every one of us sitting in this room has had some background.
So if in this life I'm a good person and I do care of animals and compassion and stuff, would it be another chance that in my previous life I would be a very bad and evil person that doesn't care about anything?
Well, I don't know. But the law of karma, the principle is that as you sow, so shall you reap. So whatever you did in a previous life, you have to get the karmic reaction for that. So that would come, a portion of that would come in the previous life, some in this life, some maybe in the next life. So the reactions to our karma gets distributed through different lifetimes. It's not necessarily received only in one life.
So we are the makers of
our own destiny.
eternal future?
Absolutely right. We are indeed the makers of our own destiny, of our own future. That's right. Yes?
Does the soul grow through the experiences also?
Does the soul grow through the experiences? Well, actually the soul is already pure. It's just that the soul has forgotten itself. the soul has been covered over at the present moment by illusion because of conditioned or contaminated material intelligence and the mind. So all we need to do is to purify that covering, and the original nature of the soul just surfaces.
Okay, I got your point. I was trying to put it this way. Is there a difference between soul going through spiritual knowledge and soul going through experiences?
It's the same. You see, when you have spiritual knowledge, there's spiritual practices. And those spiritual practices bring you spiritual experiences. Spiritual experiences means that you increasingly get to understand and remember who you are. So naturally, as you advance in your spiritual understanding, your experiences of the spiritual realm will also go on evolving. Yes?
Got two.
Okay, sorry, I was looking this way. Yeah.
I sort of had a couple of questions.
Yes.
The first one had to do with, you remember how you were talking about the person being in surgery and then like waking up during the surgery, and you said that there was no possible explanation as to how they would know everything that was going on in the surgery, but I could think of a really easy explanation as to how they would know everything in the surgery. There were a lot of people, instances that I've heard of where people were hiding tape recorders under the bed. Yeah, it's not as funny as it sounds because they want to sue the anesthesiologist. So if they say they're awake during the surgery, it's so traumatic and everything like that, they then go around to sue the hospital. So it's sort of a very easy explanation as to why.
Yeah. Okay, so your question is that there are other explanations for these types of out-of-body experiences, because someone could, hide a tape recorder somewhere and do something. Interestingly, in India, people are not so code savvy, and in the West, usually you have people, just sue each other for everything, But in India, it's not like that, you see. And this was a lady who was really illiterate. She didn't even know, probably never been to a court in her life, never met a lawyer in her life, doesn't know what a tape recorder is. She was just straight out of the interiors from some village. Very simple, village lady. And this lady surgeon, was there all through. She interrogated her. And she was naturally very suspicious at the beginning and skeptical, and she made sure that there was no possibility of fraud. And incidentally, when we were on the subject, there was also a heart surgeon whose name in America or Canada, one of the two, his name is Carl Sabom. And he started encountering such patients, and he was a skeptic initially. He dismissed all these ideas as some kind of hallucination or fraud or something. But when the evidence started mounting, he decided to do some research himself. So he actually started documenting these cases and actively pursued such, events. And whenever people in his medical network knew of such a case, they would inform him. Then he would go and do the investigation and do the interviewing and everything. And there were many patients who were patients that he operated upon. And after going through hundreds of such cases, then he wrote a book, Near-Death Experiences. And there he claims that I started off as a skeptic, but I end up believing that in some cases there is doubt, but there are many, many cases which leave no room for doubt that there is something else that is distinct from this body. There is something else that left the body and was able to see the body. And here was a skeptic. He was trained as a cardiovascular surgeon, and then he wrote this book. I mean, you do Google for Carl Sabom, I'm sure you'll find a lot of information.
Well, my second question was, did he sell the book for a lot of money?
Well, maybe, but these things do happen. These things have been scientifically also established by people of scientific credentials, And people, they're putting their neck on the block. Please imagine that here are people from the scientific fraternity, they can't afford to just say something for the sake of a little money. Their entire credibility will be affected. That's why I spoke about a person like him, Carl Sabam, who's a well-known name in the field in his time. But he couldn't risk his career, to do something like that. He wouldn't do it unless he was absolutely certain that what he was doing was right. He published many papers even on this, and they were published in scientific journals and psychology and so on and so forth. So at the very least, it merits very serious investigation, even if somebody is skeptical, but these things happen. And there are many phenomena that we cannot explain otherwise. Because this model gives us such a detailed understanding of how the body-mind intelligence complex works. It's the most complete and comprehensive explanation of phenomena.
Do you think that there's a lot of forms of sleep apnea where people aren't completely asleep, but they're a little bit awake too? It just goes at the top of the room and stuff like that, hearing everything, but you might not have been completely.
Okay, so you're saying that what if it's apnea? Where you're asleep, but you're not quite so asleep. You can hear, but when you're undergoing a heart surgery, a open heart bypass surgery, then it's not apnea. Believe me. Then you're really out here. Then there's no way you could be conscious or understand what's going on around you. Not when they cut up your chest and opened up your chest and they've taken out your heart and they're doing all sorts of things with your heart,
So we'll go with the tape recorder. My other question was,
yes.
Like how you said that there's little souls everywhere of all the germs and all of that. I heard another theory where we all belong to the same soul, and that's God's soul. And then, say I made a little wind-up toy and wound it up, and I transferred a part of my energy into that toy, and I did a few more, maybe 3 or 4 of them each time, transferring a little bit of my motion energy into these toys. The same way God transfers a little bit of His, energy into each of us, and then once we finish here, we go back to Him for her.
Sorry? Actually, quite a bit of what you said is right, in the sense that the individual souls, each of them, they're identical in terms of constitution. And each soul, according to the Bhagavad Gita, is a very, very tiny, fragmental portion of God's energy. So we, as spirit souls, are spiritual sparks or fragments of the spiritual energy of God. And we then are now caught up in this cycle of birth and death, and we're moving from body to body, body to body, and so on. So that's our position. See, we're extremely tiny. Okay? All right, yeah, okay. Yes?
When a soul goes back to the spiritual world,
right.
Is there a chance of it ever coming back to the material?
Okay, when the soul goes to the spiritual world, is there a chance that it can come back? In the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna says, no. He says, once you come back to me, then no more coming back to this material world. Because now you can again say, in another sense, been there, done it, no more. No more. And it's like a nightmare, so you don't want to go back there again. Right? Yeah, somebody else said it. Yeah.
My question is, why come back? Why go to the spirit world?
Why come back?
Or why go through all the cycles? Why reach 100%? Why go to the spirit world? Why any of it?
why go to the why attempt to go to the spiritual world? Yes? Because as I mentioned earlier, this material world is a nightmare. Because it's a place of misery. It's a place where there's repeated birth, death, old age, disease. There's varieties of sufferings. We are the eternal spirit soul. We are spiritual by nature. And our constitutional position is that we are eternal, full of knowledge, and full of bliss. But somehow or the other, we have forgotten who we are. We have forgotten that we are originally blissful and eternal. We identify ourselves with this material body, which is temporary and which is a source of misery. And therefore we identify ourselves with this miserable situation. So by taking to spirituality, we cut this cycle of illusion. We come out of this miserable situation into which we are forced. And we return to a spiritual atmosphere which is our natural home. Yes?
My question is more like why be in that natural home? Like once, like let's say I go through all the cycles, cut off the pain, and reach that spiritual goal. Like why be there? Why is that there?
You see, this world is made of matter. Yeah? And the spiritual world is made of spirit. So spirit is the home of spirit, matter is the home of matter. So we are spirit. So we are in an incompatible situation in a world of matter. We are in the material world. It's like a fish out of water. So the soul in matter is like a fish out of the water. So when there's a spiritual atmosphere, it's like the fish being returned to water. Because that is our natural atmosphere. We can be happy only in that situation. If you take a fish out of the water and give it the best that Melbourne shopping districts have to offer, the fish is not going to be happy. All the fish needs is to be placed in water once again, right? So once you place the fish in water, the fish will be happy. Similarly, we as spirit souls are not this body. So whatever we may do to give pleasure to this body, or even to the mind for that matter, or the intelligence, will not make us happy, because I am not this body, I am not this mind, I am not this intelligence. Therefore, whatever I may do for these things will still keep me unhappy, because I am still out of my natural element, so to speak. It's only when I'm restored to my natural condition, the spiritual atmosphere to which I belong, that I will become happy. So spiritual life is all, or this whole process of coming out of the cycle of birth and death is all a question of returning us to our natural condition, like a fish back to water. It's as simple as that.
Okay.
Yeah, is it?
Not quite.
No? So where is the gap?
I don't know if that question even has an answer, but I guess if we're talking about this life being miserable,
Yes.
what if you disagree with that? What if like life's exciting and enjoyable? And why like go to a goal to get rid of it? Like I understand like the fish, and once you're out, you're like, oh, it's much better out, but I don't know.
Yeah, well, life may have its exciting moments. Life may...
not enjoy what you've got. Because why like run to something?
Yeah, but it's also like this, in the midst of all the pleasurable moments that are there in life, they're actually speaking very few. Really, if you look at it very objectively, the pleasurable moments in life are few and far between. But the question we ask is, I don't want to grow old. Why am I forced to grow old? Sorry?
That's not what I'm saying.
No, I'm indicating that there are things that are forced upon us because old age is misery. I don't want to get diseased, but I'm forced to get diseased sometimes because disease is a form of suffering. I don't want to die, but I'm forced to die. Similarly, I don't want to be born, but I'm forced to be reborn. So all these four are forced or imposed sufferings upon us. Even birth is very painful for the mother and for the child. Therefore we call it labor pain. It's never labor pleasure, right? So the question we ask is, why are these unwanted conditions being forced upon us when I don't want it? What is happiness? Happiness means, in very simple language, to have what you want and to not get what you don't want. Am I right? Very simple definition, non-philosophical, simple, down-to-earth definition. You get what you want, but you don't get what you don't want. But does that happen? How often do you get what you want? And how often do you not get what you don't want? All through our life we get things we don't want. And only sometimes we get some things that we want. So why not live a life where you have everything that you want and you don't get anything that you don't want? That's the spiritual world. So long as you have this material body, you're going to get things you don't want. Because this material body means suffering. This material body is programmed, designed for suffering. Birth, death, old age, disease. And a little bit of pleasure here and there, interspersed, a few moments here, a few moments there. But by and large, it's a body and a world that gives suffering. So we don't want to make it sound like a very negative kind of approach, but it's just reality, isn't it? We have to face the reality of life, that this is what this life is, and only then will we strive for something beyond this. When we understand the true nature of our own existence in this, then we will not pursue illusory forms of happiness. We will not go behind things that will eventually lead to disillusionment and frustration. Eventually, all our pursuit of happiness in this life ends in death, which is ultimate defeat. So then we ask the question, can we conquer death? Can we live an eternal life? That's the idea. Okay? And if there's any more questions, we can sit after the talk and... Yes? Yes. Any other? One last question. How are we doing for time, Manoj?
I'm here.
Question here. Okay, all right. Oh, you're here. Okay. How are we doing for time? I don't mind sitting all night long, but I mean...
I think we'll have one more question.
One, okay. Okay.
First one, you said, obviously, to some degree I can see it like as well, there's a lot of suffering and stuff like that. Why did we end up here in the first place if there's so much suffering? Like, why are we here? Second question is sort of like, going forward, sort of based on what Gil was saying, it just sounds like this world, based on what you explained tonight, it's like a lot of, it's very negative, it's really gloomy place to live. We all have a lot of years ahead of ourselves to live. How do we live our life knowing that it's just, we're all going to die and it's just and what's the point? Like, why should we work? Why should we do anything? We're all going to just die.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay, all right. So let me take the first question. Why did we come here in the first place? Yeah? So to use an expression, I think you may use it here in Australia, I don't know. Yeah, we blew it badly, didn't we? We came here. That was a misuse of our free will. The spirit, the soul has free will. Free will means you can use it for one purpose, which is good, or for another purpose, which may not be good. So we had a choice to be with the spiritual atmosphere and serve God, or to be in the material atmosphere and try to enjoy independently. We chose the second. We chose to be here. So now we pay the price for it. But we realize our mistake. Now that we've got the city of 9 gates, And we've entered this city, yeah, okay, now I start thinking, yeah, I should do something about it. So this is an opportunity for that. Now your second question is that if we just consider that there's death and all, what is the purpose of it all if we're just going to be thinking about death? Well, you see, we're not painting a depressing, negative picture of the world. But on the other hand, we also don't want to live in an illusory utopia that death is never going to come. So we are taking into account the factual realities of life. That what am I working for? What is the goal of my life? If life is a journey, where am I headed? These are logical questions to ask. Let's say you meet someone in a flight at the airport, and you ask him, "Sir, where are you going?" And he says, "I don't know." So, well, you're getting this flight, yeah, whichever flight takes me anywhere. I just go somewhere. Where are you going? And for what purpose are you going? I don't know. So human life is especially meant for understanding where we are going, where we should be going, and for what. So we have to appreciate the practicalities of it. It's like saying if I want to drive, and I'm a new driver, and the coach keeps telling me, "Look, there's this rule and that rule and this rule." I say, "Come on, let me drive." Why take such a negative picture of everything? Because if I'm not forewarned about it, then I'll have bigger trouble later on. Yes? So similarly, awareness of death is important, because then we need to know what's beyond death. Everything I'm struggling for will ultimately be gone at death. So is there a way I can conquer death? I'm not meant to die because I'm the soul. Then why do I have to go through this traumatic experience called death? Is there something more than just death? Is there something more than this material body? Now we are talking. So therefore, the understanding of the basic miseries of life as birth, death, old age and disease are prerequisites for knowledge. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is said that knowledge begins with this. True knowledge begins with understanding that birth, death, old age, disease are the basic sufferings of this world. So then we understand why are these sufferings forced upon me? Can I not escape death? Can I not escape disease and old age and suffering? Yes, I can, but not in this material world. I have to take up another path. And then I can attain my original constitutional position and become free from this tabernacle and go back home and live an eternal life full of bliss and joy. No death, no birth, no old age, no disease, no taxes. Yeah, okay. All right, one more question here. I don't mind, you'll have to now deal with it, Manoj. Should I or should I not? But one last question.
Is it not possible to live that eternal life, that spirituality here, now?
Yes, indeed. That's what urban yoga is for. Indeed, that's what we are advocating, that we should live this kind of life, but we lead this kind of life in preparation for the life beyond. In preparation as a qualification, as a prerequisite for being able to get our visa to go there. In that spiritual realm which is eternal, full of bliss.
What if bliss can be now?
It can't, unfortunately.
You said free will.
No, so long as this body is here, this material body, you can't have that bliss. This body will always restrict us.
If this is my costume, then my soul is, what is it? If I'm not living from my physical body, then I can be that now, yeah?
Right, but you see, so long as the physical body exists, it's going to give us pain. That's the whole point.
Oh, what if you're detached?
That's what is required, yes, exactly. That's what we have to do. We have to move in that direction of detachment from the body. Detachment from the body means detachment from the things that give pleasure to this body. right? And therefore understanding that I am not this body, I am the soul, that is spiritual, and then I strive for something higher than just the body and the things connected to this body.
I like that, yeah.
Okay? Okay. Thank you very much.
We would like to thank Bhakti Rasamrita Swami for gracing the Urban Yoga studio, and we hope that you take great pleasure in coming back to our studio year after year after year.
Thank you, I will. Let's
give him another round of applause.
You've been a wonderful audience, and you know what? This is one class I didn't see anybody sleeping. That's remarkable. It's nothing to do with me, it's to do with you, because in many other classes I see people sleeping. It's the same me, but here you weren't sleeping. So you're serious candidates. Thank you. Okay.